Hey friends, welcome back to How the Light Gets In. Slightly different angle of my office today. You can see my painting and my birds and the couch that I'm normally sitting on. I hope that you're well, and if you're not, I hope that you are doing your best to take care of yourself to get well. Years ago, I read this book called Wait or Rant by Steve Dublonica, who had a successful blog that he parlayed into a book deal. Good for him. And it's a really good book. If you've ever worked as a server, I highly recommend it. That's the main reason that I picked it up, because at the time I had a lot of waitressing jobs. And if you've never served people and you've never had like an angry middle-aged woman try to steal your livelihood for something entirely beyond your control, then I don't know that you really lived. So I bought this book, and it entertained me and it made me laugh, but there was this one little sentence that I actually had to Google, because this book, now that I think of it, is the reason I stopped loaning my books out, because I never got it back. Anyway, so there's this part in Wait a Rant where Steve says, "The world's a big place. You can't do or be everything, nor should you. Life is bigger than any one man. But when you read about other people's lives, when you read their stories, you catch a glimpse of a world bigger than your own. You may never travel 100 miles from where you were born, but if you read stories, you'll get to see the entire world." And I've always really believed that. I've always been a reader. If you've ever been in my office, you know that on the other side of this camera, there are books, a lot of books. And if you've ever been to my house, then you would also know that there are like a buckload of books. I have a lot of them because once I buy them, they are my babies, and I have a very hard time getting rid of them. So most recently, I read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which I do highly recommend. Although if you don't have like a really intense interest in therapy, the first half of the book is probably all that you're really going to care about, to be honest. So Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist in Vienna in the 1930s, and Viktor Frankl is also Jewish. So Viktor Frankl was arrested and put into concentration camps and survived the Holocaust. And he didn't just survive the Holocaust, by the way. Like, he survived the Holocaust on fucking expert mode. He was interned at Auschwitz, he was interned at Dachau, and he made it. He notes at one point in his book that the chances of survival of a Jewish person in that time, in that place, were about 1 in 28. He survived starvation and being beaten and frostbite, and he got typhus at one point, which I didn't think you could get in the 40s. And he survived all of it. And Viktor Frankl believes that the reason that he was able to survive, and the reason that everyone else who he knows survived, is because they had a purpose, a meaning to their lives that was bigger than the suffering and the pain that they were experiencing. He repeatedly quotes Nietzsche in the book, who said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." And for the most part, I think I believe that. I think that when you have something bigger than yourself that anchors you to your life and to the world, everything else, no matter how awful, is survivable. In reading all that, I thought about one of the things that we look for when we're assessing suicidal patients. Admittedly, that is not a part of my job anymore, and it's not something I've done in several years, but I did so many that it's pretty permanently ingrained in here. But anyway, one of the things that we look for is what we call protective factors. And protective factors are, as I said, anything that anchors you to your life and to the world. And for some people, that's their children. And for some people, it's their parents. There's like a whole subgenre of memes about how like suicide seems like a good idea, but mom would be sad, so I can't do it. For some people, it's, my cat has nowhere else to go, or I want to finish this book that I've been reading, or I need to know how the show ends. Anything that requires moving into the future is a protective factor. For Viktor Frankl, that protective factor was a book that he wanted to write about logotherapy, which is his brainchild and something that I've incorporated into my work for years. Because logotherapy focuses on the two things that I find most compelling about therapy and most compelling about human life. And that is the ideas of identity and purpose. Basically, can you answer the questions, who are you and what do you want from your life? because those are things that I ask my clients repeatedly. And some of them hate it because of course they do. And others are in therapy because they don't have answers to that question and they want answers to that question. There are few things to me more important than having a direction that you're moving in. And I say that both as a therapist and as a person with a mental illness. I need to know what comes next. And if I don't know what comes next, I get like antsy. I am constantly planning and imagining and considering alternative futures, something I have a hard time not doing. I obsess, and I can openly admit that I obsess because I am an obsessive person and I have accepted that. But I need to know what the next step is. And that applies to my personal life. And I ask my clients about that. I want to know it from my friends. I want to know it from the world in general. So you can imagine that the last 5 years have been incredibly stressful for me, especially if you are a person like me who also wants to know what comes next. Having a purpose is like having a beacon, a guiding light that tells you what comes next. And we have a habit of deciding ahead of time that these goals that we're setting are unattainable and taking them away from ourselves before we even have the chance to pursue them, which is deeply unfair. On a related note, I'm in the middle of reading Untamed. And if you haven't read that, you should, because it's incredible. And Glennon, I think her last name's Doyle. I don't have the book in front of me. I'm sorry. Glennon talks quite a bit about our tendency, particularly the tendency of women, to let go of our dreams and let go of our purpose and focus instead on what we can do for others because we don't want to be selfish. So I've been reading a lot lately and I've been thinking about all these big things and I'm considering all these ideas and I'm structuring this video to talk about how important it is to have a purpose in your life. And what I'm realizing is that I don't so much have one right now. That those questions that I consider to be so important, who are you and what do you want, are getting harder for me to answer for myself. And then I realized that I'm doing the thing again. Everyone has a thing, this destructive pattern or not unhealthy cycle or whatever that you see playing out in your life again and again and again. So one of my things, because I have several, is that I keep my life completely external out of avoidance. I don't want to deal with myself and my stuff, so I throw myself into work and I throw myself into projects and I obsess about TV shows and books and social media, really anything that's going to draw that focus out from inside of me. And I see myself do it. And the good news is that this is the earliest that I've ever noticed that I was doing it before. So that's cool. And the not so great thing is that kind of necessitates that I do something about it. So now I get to restructure my life. And among other things, that means that this will likely be my last video. Maybe forever, but at the very least for a while I figure everything else out. A year ago, when I had this idea and we started this project, it felt like a natural extension of what I was already doing. I was in a really good place personally and professionally, and I had all these thoughts and ideas that just kept pinging around in my head and they needed a place to go. So I put them here, and that has worked quite well for me for a while here. But with where I'm at now, I have to at least consider, if not outrightly admit, that this has become just another in a long line of distractions to keep from having to deal with my own stuff. So I don't really know where to go from here, because the things that I was going to talk about when I talked about Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning now seem hypocritical and awkward for me to talk about. And I also think I might cry. and I don't really want to cry on camera. So instead, what I will say is if you have been here from the beginning or at any point along this journey, I love and appreciate you, and I'm glad that you were here. I hope that any of the things that I have said in any of these videos ever made a positive impact for anyone. And moving forward, I hope that we are all doing our best to answer the questions of who am I and what do I want, and doing our best to care for ourselves and care for the ones that we love. You can still follow me on Twitter because periodically I get mad or hyper focused and put stuff up there. You can still follow me on Instagram because I put quotes from the whiteboard that's just out of frame on there every week, and pictures of my dog, who is very cute, and pictures from my life, at least the parts that are exciting and good. You can also still email me. I'll keep checking that periodically. But for now, I think we're done. And I probably could have done like a less awkward job of doing this, but this is actually pretty emblematic of who I am as a human being. So at least we got that out there. Yeah. Take care of yourselves, friends. It's all going to be okay in the end.